time once we get to the bottom. Whoops. So Stover is here. Tompkins is here. The Nest is here. Watson. Yep. Saw the hand anyway. You're here. Young is here. Zwybeck. Zwybeck? Yep, is here. Lawrence is here. Wilson. And what's your last name? I'm sorry. Oh, you were from the other class, right?
Me.
Yep.
Yeah.
Okay, from Dr.
Yeah.
Lee's.
Yeah.
Okay. So just so you guys know, if it matters, we have she's your student athlete, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, so she's a student athlete. Her she's in a different class, of course, than you guys, but her schedule doesn't allow her to go to their lab, so she's doing ours. So anyway, not that it matters, but now you know. Still have a minute. So is there anybody I didn't call? All right. And since we're recording, I just want to make sure I get this again. We'll repeat it one more time because it's 9 o'clock now. Gorby is not here. Jackson is not here. And Wilson is not here. Everybody else is here. Okay. Let's jump into it. Before we do, so obviously I'm a professor. What I haven't told you yet is BJ here, and I'm going to let you introduce himself. He's a teacher's assistant. So he kind of helps me run the lab. He gets all the stuff for us. And also he can serve as your middleman. So like if you have an issue with me, like I said before, I wish you would tell me. Like, hey, I love feedback. You can tell me, but if you don't feel comfortable telling me, you can tell him, and he'll tell me, and not tell me who told me. So he's your little anonymous way to get in touch with me. Would you want to introduce yourself beyond that?
So, good morning all. My name is Vijay and I am from India. So, I did my bachelor's in agriculture sciences. So, if you are curious to know more about the plant science research or any various things and any information related to the lab, feel free to contact me.
Yep, there's his contact
This is
information.
my contact number
Okay.
and the email ID. You can note if you want.
Yeah. So again, he's like my right-hand man. Mostly the way labs will go is I'm going to give a pre-lab lecture, and then hang around for a lot of it, if not all of it. Sometimes I'm going to give the pre-lab lecture and just leave and let it'll be in his hands. Sometimes if something comes up, I might not be here at all, and then he'll be in charge. Sometimes he'll give the pre-lab lecture, and I'll just be here to help him. But for today, I'm going to give the pre-lab lecture. You can just make yourself comfortable wherever you want. Again, like I mentioned earlier, I apologize in advance. This one might be a little bit longer than usual because we have a lot to cover. Bear with me while I fill this up here. All right. And also, I want to remind you, since you have another pre-lab due on Friday, you don't have to go alone. So I know some people said a little bit of this was confusing. But whenever there's anything that's confusing to you, just meet me online. I can walk you through these things step by step. There we go. Hypothesis testing and graphing. You guys already know how to make yourself a copy. If you don't, we'll talk about that later. You should have already read the objectives, but we do need to talk about the syllabus. So even though you've read it, let's talk about it very quickly. As you already know, we are scheduled to be here every Wednesday. I know that's a little bit hard to read, from 9 to 10:50, right? Plan to be here the whole time. A lot of times we will get out early, but don't let that be, I don't want you to think if there's like some kind of trend, like, hey, we're always done at like 10:30, so I'm going to plan on being here at 10:45. Plan on being here until 10:50. And like I mentioned previously, I usually lock the door at 9 for labs because I'm very strict about starting on time, and if you come in late, you can't come in. So that's the lab schedule and location. Any questions about that? Okay. Pre-lab worksheet, we've already talked about that. You need to turn that in. It's always due on Friday. Again, like I just said, you don't have to do it on your own. Let me know if you need help. The lab worksheet itself is on the same worksheet, as you know. It's just, you got the one worksheet that has the pre-lab section and the lab section. The lab worksheet that you're working on today, once again, will need to be downloaded as a PDF and then you'll need to upload it and replace the current PDF that you have in there for the pre-lab. And if, again, we're here, I'm here, so if you need help with that, let me know. Yep, that's the stuff we already talked about. Officially, late work, all right. So it's in writing here. This way, if it gets abused, I can always just go back to what's in writing. Late submissions will not be accepted. Right, that's the official thing. So I'm telling you now, I might just say, no, that's late, you're not getting any credit for it. What I'm telling you unofficially is, if you missed the due date, just go ahead and turn it in. Because most likely I will grade it. There might be some kind of penalty, or I might say, hey, since you turned in this late, do a little bit of extra, please, right? But that's the unofficial policy, is go ahead and turn it in. And I will say this, and I mentioned it before. Always prioritize the pre-lab, because I am strict with that, because I need to know that you've done the pre-lab before you come in, because I need to know you know what you're doing before you come in. So when you're trying to prioritize, well, what should I turn in first? I've got a lot of due dates coming. Prioritize the pre-lab. Make sure that's not late. Everything else, do what you can. Any questions about that? Lab materials, looks like you guys have all done it. I highly recommend bringing your computer, since you're doing the labs physically, but you're going to be answering the questions online and turning them in online. So I recommend that. I recommend also, like what I see from some of you, is have some paper to write on, some pencils to write with, right? That'd be very helpful. It's not required, I'm not gonna check and make sure everybody's got a pencil, and if you don't, I'm gonna kick you out. But I recommend it. Behavior and attendance. I'll talk more about that when we talk about lab safety, but this is usual stuff, Be respectful of others. Do not be late, right? You have to be late. You have to be present. So there's one person who's not here today who did do the pre-lab, so I won't get into it. But anyway, if somebody just doesn't show up to a lab, they get a 0, right? So the whole thing is worth 20. So if you miss a week, you miss 20 points. Yeah, any questions about that? All right, lab reports, we'll talk about that more when we get there, but you've got the syllabus now, you can refer back to it. It is also worth 20 points. It's going to be based on the photosynthesis and respiration lab. So because of that, I will call that an important lab, not the photosynthesis and respiration is more important than any of the other stuff we do. But for your grade, it is more important. So when the time comes, there'll be one lab where we just meet and do this. It'll be a pre-lab lecture where I tell you how that lab's going to work, and I teach you how to write a lab report. And then the following week, we'll come in, and then we'll actually do the photosynthesis and respiration lab. But yeah, basically, it's worth 20 points. There's a worksheet that I give you that breaks it down, like this many points. Does it have a title? Is the title appropriate? Does it have an abstract? Is this information in the abstract, right? If you just go point by point, it should be very simple. And just like everything else other than other than exams in the semester, I can help you. You don't have to do any of this alone. I will meet you online and walk you through these things step by step. Another thing about lab reports is, if you want, and again, there's the sheet right there if you want to look at it. That's the sheet for the experiment that you're going to be writing a lab report about. But for the entire semester, you can write a lab report for extra credit on any of these labs that we do. Grief. So extra credit if you do that, plus it'll give you some experience writing lab reports. So any questions about lab reports? Excuse me, lab report. How long? That's a great question. There is no length requirement. Short and sweet is what I like. This is scientific writing, so it's not supposed to be descriptive or entertaining. So you won't say something like, first, 3 other students and I, one of which smelled really bad, gingerly grabbed the stuff and the test tubes and put it on the 3rd table from the back, right? You don't need to be all descriptive. Just be really to the point. And when we have that pre-lab lecture, the week before we do it, I'm going to get really into detail. But for now, just know, since you asked, no, there is no minimum word. Again, I'll have a rubric that'll say it'll be broken down. Does it have this? Does it have this? Does it have this? As long as you can check off all those things, like I did this, I did this, I did this, then you're good. I like it to be short. I've got a lot of stuff to grade, so the shorter the better. All right. Any other questions about lab reports? Again, I'll teach you how to do a lab report later in the semester. All right, point breakdown. You guys have already answered questions about this on the pre-lab. If remember, everybody got it correct, except some people who misunderstood the question, but that's okay. At least I think you still do what I was getting at later. So each lab, every time we meet, it's worth 20 points, right? So you got 5 points for the pre-lab, which you guys have already done. You got 15 points for the lab, which we're going to do today. If you have extra credit points on your pre-lab, those bleed over into your lab. And then if you score perfectly on your lab and still have extra credit points and have nowhere to apply them because the highest grade you can get is 20, those points will be added to your course total. So you'll have all kinds of extra credit opportunities. Anyway, and as some people answered, the only people who got that first question wrong about how much is the lab worth, and the answer is 20. The few people that got it wrong also kind of got it right because their answer was always this, 300. So if it was asking about the lab section, you would be correct, right? The entire lab section is worth 300. The whole course is worth 1,000. So that means the entire lab section is worth 3 letter grades, right? It's a lot. Second behind exams. So labs are important. Miscellaneous. Nah, that just shows you how to do screenshots. So we won't even talk about that. Any questions about the lab syllabus? All right, let's move forward. Lab safety. Let's talk about this. This is required. If I don't go through it, I know you've all read it. If something happens and we get sued, he never even told us about lab safety. So here we go. Let's talk about it. First rule is think safety first. And I love that. The reason that's the first one is because it's a very blanket statement. So if there's anything not on this list, but it's not safe, then don't do it. Nowhere on this list does it say, don't bring in a bobcat. Don't bring in a wild animal into the lab. It's not on the list. But number one right there is think safety first. So bringing in a wild animal into the lab would not be safe. Therefore, it falls under rule number 1. Don't do it. Any questions about that? Shoot. This one. I'll go ahead and do it. Starting next week, no food or drinks allowed in the lab. Next week, we start dealing with chemicals. So for that reason, you don't want them in here. There's a little shelf right here. So when you come in, you can just leave all your food and drinks right there. If I were you too, and that reminds me, we should get some cleaner. If you do bring in food, like for lecture, yeah, we've got cleaner in the back. If I were you, I would clean your table down before you bring any food in. Because you don't know what kind of experiments have been done for you guys. And if they follow their rules, which tell them to clean up after themselves, maybe they did. So it's very important. You should probably clean up after yourself. Any questions about the food or drink rule? All right. And again, in lecture, technically, you're not supposed to have food or drinks either. It's not my rules. It's the university rules. But hey, what are you going to do? As long as you clean up after yourself, I really don't care. Except in lab, you can't have it in lab. All right. Rule number 3, wear proper lab attire. Enclosed shoes, long pants, no excessively loose clothing. Failure to do so will result in being asked to leave the lab. Yeah, so it's very important that you wear safe stuff. Today is an exception because we're dealing with meter sticks and rulers, so everything's safe. But moving forward, make sure you do that. How many of you live on campus? You guys are lucky, right? So if you forget this rule, you could just sit through the pre-lab lecture and then really quick go run and get what you need and come back. And again, for those of you who don't live on campus, and if you drive and have a vehicle, I would leave a pair of shoes and sweatpants or whatever, long pants in your trunk. Any questions about that? All right, no fooling around. That's pretty straightforward. I've never had a problem with that. I've always had really mature students. Exercise extreme caution with open flames. As of right now, we don't plan on doing any experiments with flames. But if we do, if that changes, make sure you're careful with it. Here's a big one. Where'd it go? Excuse me. There we go. This one's kind of big and kind of important and not very intuitive. So I'm going to make sure that you guys understand this. Report any broken items to your instructor immediately. So if anything breaks, don't clean it up. And most people would do that. Like, oh, I broke this. Let me just pick it up. Don't do that. Let us do it. So if you have a test tube and you break it, it's not a big deal. Just let us know. Punishment or anything. But let us, VJ or I, clean it up for you because we don't want you to get injured. And obviously, I have full confidence that you can pick up a broken piece of glass and not get injured. But for liability reasons, let us do it. On a slightly related note, keep all unnecessary items away. Today, that won't be a problem. But again, when we're doing experiments, maybe where we're working with chemicals and test tubes, you wouldn't want, for example, to do it right here, right? This would be a horrible place to be setting up an experiment next week because you guys have computers and pencils and stuff, right? Bags. You don't want to do that. Basically, use some common sense. Any questions about that? Here's another big one. It seems small, but it's big. Report all accidents and injuries to us immediately, right? Even if it's just a little nip. So again, if you accidentally break a piece of glass, Maybe you got a little nick and it probably only needs more, maybe not even need a Band-Aid. But even if it's just something small and we don't need to go anywhere, just let us document it, because you could get a little nick and then you could rub your little finger on one of these tables where somebody was doing some kind of experiment with bacteria. The next thing you know, you get a bad infection and you lose your hand. Now, if you haven't documented that, then you're out of luck, right? But if you documented it, hey, maybe at least WVSU can pay for your lost hand. So make sure you document any little accident you get. Any questions about that? All right. Dispose of hazardous materials properly. That's always going to be on us. So whenever there's any situation where you need to dispose of anything, that'll be part of the pre-lab lecture. I'll say, all right, when you're done with that, just leave it there. We'll take care of it. Or when you're done with this, throw it in the trash can. Or when you're done with that, put it on that cart right there. Whatever it may be, we'll tell you what to do. If you ever don't know what to do, just ask. Or just don't move anything. Just leave it there. Any questions about that? All right. The emergency eye wash station. Uh-oh. Needs to be fixed. I'm glad we're not doing anything today. VJ, if you can remind me, that green thing in the back, that little in the back corner, that should be the emergency eye wash station. There should be a big bottle of water that you would squeeze into your eyes if you needed it. So luckily for us, we're not doing anything we're going to need an eye wash today because it is not here. So we'll have that fixed before next week. Any questions about that? This is just whenever you're on WVSU's campus, you should know your in place procedure. In this case, when you're in Hamlin, you go all the way down to the bottom in the auditorium. Sometimes it'll be a drill. I think I've been through like one drill my whole time since I've been here, maybe two. I've been here at least as a student since 2010. I've been here for a while, in one way or the other. But sometimes it's real. And since I have been here, there has been one real shelter in place. So it's important that you get there quickly. Don't try to leave because, again, if it's not a drill, sometimes gases, we're working right down the road from some bad stuff. So it might kill you to leave and try to, drive away. That could kill you. Of course, we could also die in Hamilton too, but at least we'd all die together, right? Easier to clean up the bodies if we're all together. Any questions about shelter in place? All right. Be considerate of others. Clean up after yourself. Again, we'll tell you how to clean up stuff. Like make sure you put this here, that there. That's pretty straightforward. Any questions about that? Here's a pretty big one. If you have questions about safety or concerns, like if you think I'm doing something unsafe, again, I prefer you to tell me. So it's like, hey, I don't feel safe doing this. Let me know. If you don't feel comfortable letting me know, you can let VJ know. If you don't feel comfortable letting either one of us know, there's the phone number. There's the safety phone number. So you can call them and say, hey, this guy's nuts. He's doing crazy things. You need to come stop him before somebody loses an eye. That probably won't happen, but we'll see. Anyway, any questions about that? All right, and then finally, like I've said 1.5 million times, you have to be on time. I'm pretty laid back on a lot of things. Being here on time for lab is not one of them. You have to be here on time. The door will be locked. It's not fair for your classmates for you to come in late. Just like it's not fair for your classmates if you come in unprepared, which is why if you haven't done the pre-lab, you can't come in. So that's it for lab safety. Any questions about that? All right, we're getting there. Introduction to hypothesis testing. You should have already read that. So I'm not going to cover that with you right now because as we do this experiment together, I'm going to bring out some information from that. So we're just going to skip across that unless somebody has questions about it. So you've all read it. You've all read the introduction to hypothesis testing. Does anybody have any questions? All right. Same thing with graphing. You've all read the information about graphing. Actually, this one, really quickly, I will point a few things out. Make sure when you do your graphs, you're following, use this. I keep this bookmark. Come back to this document. You need to make sure you follow these rules. Basically, a graph should make sense to anybody who reads just the graph. That's my number one piece of advice. Yes, you can read all those other stuff, but you should be able to give somebody a graph and they know exactly what it means without having to read the entire lab. There should be enough information in the title and the x-axis label and then the y-axis label, right? There should be so much information that someone can read it and understand what it means. Usually people miss points for not properly labeling their graphs, not properly giving it a title. What's another common mistake? I think that's it usually. Oh yeah, another thing. because as you know from a previous discussion, I wish I had my marker. The independent variable is always on the x-axis. The dependent variable is always on the y-axis. And what that means for this course, thanks. For this course, any graph you make, anytime we have a bar graph, should always be bars going up and down, not side to side. Make sense? There's a little cheat sheet there for you. Bars in this class always go up and down, not side to side. You always need a title. Your x-axis always needs a label. Your y-axis always needs a label. You always need to use units. So in this case, when we're going to be graphing, cross that bridge when we get there. Anyway, like if you were doing something where you were measuring something over time, right? So you could put time on your x-axis and then parentheses, even with time, you need units. So what are we talking about time? We're talking about seconds, minutes, whatever. So minutes in that case. And then maybe you were looking at, I don't know, the height of something, H-I-G-H-T. So there we go. But you need your units. So in parentheses, let's say we measured it in centimeters. So parentheses, cm. So those are the most common mistakes. Everything else, we'll just cross that bridge when we get there. And just like everything else, don't be afraid to make mistakes. If you make mistakes, I'll turn your grade back, you'll lose some points, and then you can just fix it and get your points back. So it's a very low pressure situation here. And as a matter of fact, in my opinion, that's one of the best ways to learn. If you make a mistake and then have to go back and fix it, it's really going to stick in your brain that way. So it's okay to make mistakes. This is very low pressure. Just do the best you can. And I will be nitpicky, only because I'm trying to teach you. So you might lose a few points here and there, but it's not really going to affect your grade much. And again, you can fix it. So any questions about graphs? All right. Moving forward, some videos you can watch for extra credit. Yeah, that's it. So pre-lab questions. Since everybody's done this, I'm not going to go over the answers. The only one that people, well, no, I guess I want to give you the answers really quickly. So one lab is worth 20 points, like we talked about earlier. That was missed a few times, that people at least were on the right track and said 300 because the entire lab section is worth 300 points. What are the 9 steps in scientific method? We're going to go through that throughout the semester. I'm not going to waste your time on that. Yeah, rule number 12. I just arbitrarily picked number 12 to make sure you read that. What do graphs provide? Again, just to make sure you read that. All right, so to answer this one. So you got a bunch of plants, right? And they grew. We measured them once at the end of the experiment. So we know this one grew 15. The one grown in white light grew 15. The one grew in green light grew 10 centimeters. So that's a bar graph, right? You just have discrete data. Now, if you were to graph, if your data included like measuring this once a week for a year, and then you had continuous data, that would be a line graph. But since you just have discrete data, like this is it grew 15 centimeters. This one grew 10. This one grew 7. That would be a bar graph. I think most people got that correct. Any questions about that? Okay. Independent variable versus dependent variable. Again, using that as an example, if we wanted to see if light color affects how much plants grow, then the light color is the independent variable. Because in that experiment, we wanted to see, again, if light color affects how much plants grow. So the growth in that experiment would be dependent on the light, which would be the independent variable. Any questions about that? All right. A good key aspect, I need to reword that. But anyway, that's just another one of those questions that prove that you read the introduction. So somewhere in the introduction, it says something like, a key aspect of a good experimental design is, so if you were to look at that and look for the word key in that introduction, then that's the answer. Oh, and the answer is reproducibility. Key aspect to experimental design, according to that sheet, is reproducibility. There's a bunch of other key aspects that we'll talk about as we do these experiments. Yeah, the other ones aren't nearly as important, and I'm trying to save your time, so let's get moving. Oh yeah, here's another one, number 10. Very often, you'll get the last question of the pre-lab will be something like this, which instructs you to go ahead and read everything else in the lab, and then ask one question about the lab. So put yourself in my shoes when you're writing this. What I'm trying to do is make sure you read the entire lab. So you're going to want to ask some question that involves, something about the lab past that. So don't ask anything to do with the pre-lab. You just did the pre-lab. I just want to ensure that you read the whole lab. And then another heads up, for some of these labs, you'll do the pre-lab, and then after that, you have to do some hypotheses. So that's just a heads up, and again, we'll cross that bridge when we get there. So any questions about that? All right. Do you have anything, BJ, before we actually jump into the experiment finally? Anything you want to add about safety, graphs, or hypothesis testing, anything?
Yeah.
Good to go. All right. Then we'll move forward. Finally, let's get into it. Hypothesis testing. Again, you need to have read the entire worksheet. First of all, let's do this together. We're going to make some observations, because remember, observations are the first step of the scientific process. So if you can all stand up, just hold your hands out, and everybody just look at each other and observe what you're looking at. So everyone stand up and hold your hands out. You don't necessarily need to walk around, but just look around and look at all your classmates who have all stood up and they've got their hands out, and observe them. Right? There's a lot of things we can observe right here, right? So make sure you're looking around. Go look at your classmates. Turn around, look at your classmates. So you see everybody, right? You're seeing how tall everybody is, how wide their arms are, how wide their fingers are, all that stuff. All right, you guys can sit that down. So that's the observation. Now, you guys have probably already read ahead. You should have anyway. So let's pretend like you haven't read ahead. No, forget that. You have read ahead. So forget about what we're actually going to test. Forget that. But answer me this. Based on these observations we just saw, what are some questions we can ask, other than the one that we actually are going to ask in this lab? What are some questions we could ask based on those observations? It's a limitless amount of questions you could ask. So what do you guys think? What are some scientific questions we could ask based on the observations you just saw by looking at everybody stand up and do this? Oh, we gotta do something. It's gonna be too boring. The semester just started. What are some observations, based on those observations, what are some questions we could ask scientifically? Other than the one that we actually are going to ask today. Good, very good. What are some other questions that we could ask based on those observations? Here, I'll give you one, and then let's get some others. Is there a correlation between sex and eye color? Right? Like, looking at everybody, I don't know if you guys can see each other's eyes, but it's like, who's got more blue eyes? The males or the females? Right? That's one question based on just looking around. What are some other questions you could ask based on some observations, based on your observations? Things that we could test scientifically. You guys are either really shy or really not creative. Think about it. Just look, you guys just all stood up and looked at each other. What are some experiments we could run, some questions we could ask and answer scientifically?
Average height.
Well, that's the one, yeah, that's one we're going to ask. I just want at least one. I want somebody to be creative. Are you guys shy? What is it? Hair color versus what? Yeah, all right. So what about hair color? I like that. What? Right. There's all kinds of stuff we could ask about hair color, right? Like, is there a correlation between sex and hair color? Is there a correlation between race and hair color? Of course, sometimes race is a little bit hard to define scientifically, but anyway, the point is we could ask a lot of questions, right? As a matter of fact, for extra credit, since you guys seem to be hopefully you're just shy, but maybe you're not creative. So in case you're not creative, for extra credit, write some papers about some questions that we could ask scientifically. You have to be specific and think about what kind of, we need to be able to run an experiment to answer that question. But think about that, write it for extra credit if you want. Anyway, there's the observation. So as some of you already hinted at, the question that we're going to ask based on the observation, is there a correlation between someone's height and their finger span? That's the question. What comes after a question in the scientific process?
Isn't it?
What is it? What comes after a question? How about in everyday life, when someone asks you a question, what comes after? How do you respond when someone asks you a question? An answer, right? So in this, what do we call it? Because it's not technically an answer yet, but when you get a question in science, what's the next step?
Hypothesis.
There you go, hypothesis. This is very important. Make sure you know that. Yes, a hypothesis is the next step. So there's only two basic hypotheses to this question. If I'm asking you, is there a correlation between height and finger span? If you get really basic, there's only two possible hypotheses, and what are they? I'm asking you, is there I'm asking you, how about that? I'm asking you, is there a correlation? Do you think there's a correlation between height and finger span?
Yes.
Okay. Do you think there's a question between height and finger span?
Yes.
Okay. Okay, that's yes. That's one of the possible answers. What's the other possible answer?
No.
No, right? So those are the two basic hypotheses, and you can use those if you want. Now, if you want to get really specific, you could. You could say something like, the taller they are, the wider the finger span, or the shorter they are, the wider the finger span. You can get specific if you want, but when you really think about it, those are the two basic hypotheses. Yes or no. So you're going to go ahead and write that. For question number 1. So that's what we first talked about, right? So never mind, scrap that. That's not extra credit. That's literally question number 1. So you need to come up with some question based on the observations, other than the whole height and finger span, right? That's some hypothetical question. I forgot that question was in there. So it's not extra credit. Come up with a question that we could answer and write it down. Then you're going to come up with a hypothesis for it. And again, usually you can keep those very basic, like, yes, there is a correlation. No, there's not, right? All right. Now, again, we've already been through this. I told you the actual question. Now that you have your question and hypothesis, here's the actual question being answered. Is there a correlation between height and finger span? So for number 3, you need to write yes or no. It's that simple. Unless you want to get specific, and you can. Yes, the taller people are, the wider their finger span. Or the taller they are, the more narrow their finger span. Whatever you want to do. But again, at the very least, number 3 should be yes or no. All right. So let's talk about the design here. Now we'll get into the meat video. Here's how this is going to work. And you don't have to come up yet, BJ, if you don't want. But soon he's going to come up and we're going to demonstrate. What we're going to do is, and not yet, but I'll have you guys, I'm just going to stand here like this. And I'm going to measure you. And you're going to measure your finger span. And you're going to write that information there. But before we can do it, this is where we go back to this introduction that you guys already read. We want to make sure we have a good experiment design, right? So when we're talking about measuring the height, what are some things that we should agree upon before we measure our height? Because what if I just turned you loose and said, all right, I need you to measure your height and put it on the board? What are some things that we need to agree upon? Of course, it's already on the board, but what are some things? What is it?
The unit of measurement.
Yeah, the unit of measurements, right? So if I just didn't have that up there and I just said, everybody go write your height on the board. You might be like, oh, I'm 5 foot whatever. You might be like, I'm this many centimeters. You might be like, I'm this many meters, right? So we have to agree on the same unit of measurement. So I'm going to go ahead and tell you we're going to use centimeters. What are some other things to consider? If we wanted to make this a good, true experiment that we could publish, what are some things we need to consider when we're all measuring our height?
Back against the wall.
Good, back against the wall. And that is something we can do. So it's like when you come up here, you know, if someone stands here and someone else stands here and someone else stands here, and that's not going to work. So let's all agree back against the wall. What else?
Standing straight.
There you go. That was a good hint, right? So everybody just try your best to stand straight up, right? What are some other things to consider? And again, I'm just giving some hints here as you're standing up. What are some things to consider when measuring the heights here? Yeah, let's just go ahead and say feet together, right? Because, you know, I'm this tall with my feet together. I'm not going to get too crazy here, but I'm a lot shorter when I do that, right? So yeah, feet together. What are some other things? So those are all things we can do. As far as I can think of, that's the only things that we're actually going to do. But again, if we wanted to make this really scientific, what are some other things that we really should do to make sure that we're getting good measurements?
Take our shoes off.
Yeah, take your shoes off, right? But we're not doing that. It's not safe, a little bit gross, so we're not doing that. And then I can think of maybe one other thing too that we should consider if this was a real experiment. What else would that be? I'll give you a hint. It's kind of the opposite of your body of taking your shoe off. That was a little harder. We should all shave our heads, right? To make sure that our hair is not being affected. Yeah. But anyway, so for now, that's good enough. We've got that. What about measuring our finger span? What are some things that we need to determine before we do that and make sure we're on the same page? What are some things? Well, what's the first thing Stover said? It's the same situation in this too. For the last one, what was the thing you said for the last one?
Unit of measurement.
Unit of measurement, right? So again, we're going to go with centimeters. I don't need him going in centimeters, her going in inches, right? We need to be and then him being in millimeters. We're gonna do centimeters. What are some other things to consider? Like I'm saying, because this is what we did for our observation, this is what we've observed. So I'm saying, how can we measure, what do we need to agree upon before we measure our finger span? There you go. Which fingers we should use, right? So, because if I didn't say that, and then somebody measured from here to here, right, from there to there, that's going to be a lot different than somebody who measured from here to here. So, which fingers? Good, that's what this comes in. We are going to measure this, which is offensive in some countries depending on how you do it, but here it's not. So, these are the two fingers we're going to measure. We're on the right track. What are some other things we need to consider when we use centimeters to measure between these two fingers? What else do we need to consider? There's a hint, one of the things. No hint, no one's picking up on that hint. Some of the things we need to consider.
Out.
There we go. Let's go ahead and all agree to stretch out as much as you can without physically pushing them apart, right? So when you're doing it, try to pull them really far apart. Looking at this horrible picture that I drew, of that one got hit with a hammer, I guess. Anyway, we've got these two fingers. What are some other things we consider? I'm saying that we're in centimeters. You're going to stretch these two fingers out as much as you can, and you're going to measure the distance between this finger and this finger. What's some things I need to consider now? All right, well, I'll give you an example. What if I just turn you loose and do that? And she's like, all right, I'll do that. The stover measures from here to here, right? Meanwhile, someone else measures from here to here, right? That would be a lot different. You even using the same fingers, this person's measuring like towards I call it the finger crotch. I don't know what the actual term is, but this person's measuring towards the finger crotch, and on the inside, this person's measuring at the very tips and on the outside, right? So we have to make sure we're on the same page. So that being said, I'm gonna go ahead and tell you now, instead of just talking about it and guessing and waiting, I'm gonna arbitrarily say we're gonna measure from the inside here, from this knuckle to this knuckle, right? From here to here. Everybody on the same page? Okay. So now VJ and I are going to demonstrate what to do. And then once he and I are done demonstrating it, then you're all going to come up to me. I'm going to tell you how tall you are. Then you're going to use these to measure your finger span, and then you're going to go put it on the board in the correct spot. If you need help with where the correct spot is, let me know. All right, BJ, if you can come stand up against this wall. Oh, that's fine. We're going to call him 171 centimeters. So if you want to measure your finger span and then put that on the board and move it up to the correct spot, I'll get that. Don't worry about it. Also, another thing to point out, just to make things a little bit less awkward, instead of standing like this, if you guys want, stand like this. I probably got pretty bad cotton breath, and you don't want that. So stand here so I'm not breathing in your face. Yeah. There we go. So yep, from inside to inside. Here, you hold it like that. Here, so you guys can see, right? So that inside knuckle, right? So, and now if you guys want help like this, you guys can get help. So I'm saying 5, you think? 5 centimeters? Yeah, 5. So, all right. He's 171 centimeters, so he falls under this category. So he'll write 171 for his height. And then finger span, or F, yeah, 5. That's it. So we're going to do that. You're going to put your information on the board. And then once that's all done, I'll look for a volunteer to figure out the averages for everybody, and you'll get extra credit for being a volunteer. And that's it. So let's get to measuring. And again, as we're doing this, think about some of the flaws in these experiments. We've talked about some of them. All right, I want to say 178. Well, she can do that. Yeah. So BJ, they'll write their own information. Yeah. You guys come on up, get in line. Don't be shy. So how accurate do you think this is? What I'm doing? I'm gonna say, I don't know, 164. It's not very accurate, right? So again, this is one of the flaws in the experiment. If we were to make this better, we should do use one of those things they use in the doctor's office. 161. say 183. See, look, with the hair, it's making it difficult. You guys have bigger hair. So I really am just guessing. I don't know, 181. 183. Let's say 182. And if you're curious, obviously you can just look up, you probably guys know how tall you are, so if you want to, 172. If you want to, you guys can do a conversion, look up, like, I'm sure you know how many feet and inches you are. See how close we are to being accurate, because my guess is probably very inaccurate. 164. 166. 171. You guys make sure you use centimeters and not inches. Make sure you use the right part of the fingers, all that stuff. 184. 154. Another flaw of this experiment is my height, right? So probably the shorter you are, the less accurate I am.
Can you start at 1?
Hold on, I'll show you. I want to make sure I'm looking at it right, so I give you the right answer. 76.
Am I doing it right?
Should be starting at 0, if that's an option.
Yeah, right.
It should be an option.
Yeah. From this top up.
170. Wait. Sorry, Smith. I'm glad I paid that. So yours, can you put it in the correct column? You put yours in the tall column. There you go. Perfect. Thank you. Let's say 176. Another thing that could improve this experiment
Oh, you did. Okay,
is
sorry.
if we were more precise. Like if I said 176.3, we're not doing that, right? 185. You know what, we could have exempted you from this, but 178, since you're already out there. Does anybody want to volunteer to do the averages for extra credit? All right, champion's gonna do it. So once you figure out the averages, you can just write them right there on the board. I'll draw a line for you, and that's the data you need. So you're gonna use this information to fill out your tables on your form. He's gonna do the average. Obviously, we don't have anybody for very short, so leave that blank. Don't put zeros in there, because if you put a 0 in there, that indicates that you measured somebody and they were 0 centimeters tall with 0 centimeter fingerspan, right? So just leave that part blank. Same with this. We didn't have any extra tall people, so you can leave it blank. For short, so champion's doing the he's doing the averages, but he doesn't need to do the averages for the short because there's only one data set, so that is what it is. So, but he will average these, or you guys can do it yourself if you want, but whatever. He's going to do that, and that's it. This is the information you want to put on your table. Then you're going to graph. When you graph it, there's a little. You're going to have. Let's see, short, a bar for short. I'm abbreviating. I guess, yeah. I'm abbreviating, but you should have the word short, then the word medium, then the word tall, then the word very tall. right? And this is going to be, usually that, right? No, I'll put this. If you just leave short, medium, tall, very tall, that would suffice. But if you also want to add height categories as the name of your x-axis, you can, but you don't have to. In this case, small, medium, tall, very tall will suffice. On the y-axis, you need to put, and I'm going to abbreviate, but you need to write the word finger span. I'm going to put FS, and then in parentheses, centimeters, right? And then you're going to have a bar for each one. Now that we're finally getting into it, I can talk to you a little bit more about bars. What's the lowest number we have for finger spans? Looking at this. 4, right. What's our highest number? 10, good. So your lowest number doesn't have to start at 0, and it should. You should start somewhere close to 4, maybe like 3, right? Or maybe you could do 4. Maybe your first bar would go before. But anyway, you should start somewhere around 4 and end somewhere around 10. Does that make sense? Because when you're doing a graph, you want to take up as much space as you can on your graph. So since your lowest number is 4 and your highest number is 10, you know that's what you should work somewhere around there. What are some other things to notice here? Okay. So it's possible, and I'm not saying we know this for sure, but here's some advice that you guys could use in everyday life. Again, you're not biologists, so you're probably not going to be doing science in your everyday life. But again, hopefully, as an educated citizen, you will be doing research and that you're going to be looking at data. So does anybody see any outliers, any red flags in this data? Anything that sticks out, looks like it shouldn't be there? Now, it might be correct, so maybe it should be there, but does anybody see any numbers that look like they don't belong?
Short finger span.
Which one?
That's 6.
Yeah, that looks odd, right?
Yeah.
So that's odd. That's a red flag to me. So again, if you were looking at someone else's research like that, that's kind of odd. And these two look a little odd to me too as well. A 10 and a 9, much larger than the other ones. Now it's very possible this person does have a 6, and these people do have a 10 and a 9. But one of the purposes of this experiment, and I'm glad some people messed it up. I was worried, or maybe not messed it up. I'm glad we had this data because I wanted to point out this thing about red flags. Another thing, this is one of the reasons why we take averages and why a big sample size is really important. Because what if this person, well, there's two things. Either they measured wrong or they have an abnormally large finger span. And that doesn't represent most people probably. So the more people you have, right, the more data you have, the less important that one number is. Right? So imagine if we did this experiment and it was only these two people. Actually, hold on. First of all, let me make sure this is correct. That goes with that, that goes with that, that goes with that, that goes with that, that goes with that. Okay. Anyway, sorry, it was I thought it was out of whack. Anyway, imagine we did this whole experiment. Instead of having all these people in this class, we only did 2 people. And they had this and this, right? Those results would look a lot different than what we're going to get when we add in all this information. Does that make sense? This is why having a large sample size is important, because it helps adjust for things like that. And again, if we had more people than this, then our results would probably be even more accurate, because it helps take care of these things. And that's it. So you guys can be working on your lab right now. I'm just going to be talking you through it and giving you students some advice. But now that we've done the experiment together, you're on your own to fill in the lab worksheet. I'm going to look at some of these answers and questions to make sure you're on the right track. Okay. Sort of graph. Of course, while you're doing this, if you need help with any of this, like, hey, how do I put these numbers in the table? Or how do I calculate the average, which he's still working on? Okay, I'll also point this out. When you get to number 11, seems like a redundant question. But get used to that. It is, and you're going to get it every lab. What was your hypothesis, and was it correct? So yes, you're going to have to repeat your hypothesis. My hypothesis was that there was a correlation between height and finger span. Or my hypothesis was that there was not a correlation between height and finger span. And yes, my data supports my hypothesis. Or no, the data does not support the hypothesis. Now I could go back and look. I can look at your hypothesis, I can look at the data, and then I can figure out if you were correct or not. But it's up to you. This is an important part of the scientific process, is being able to analyze your data to see if it supports your hypothesis or not. Please don't let that irritate you. You're going to get that question in almost every lab. It's going to seem redundant, but you need to repeat your hypothesis and state if it was correct or not, at the very least. Sometimes, too, it'll also ask you to explain, like, what was your hypothesis? Was it correct? And use your data to explain why it was correct or incorrect. Number 12, we've already talked about. What are some of the flaws of the experiment? So when you answer that question, just think about all the things we talked about with your hair and shoes and all the problems with the way I was measuring and things like that. Let's go ahead and answer this one together. Once you're done with this and you've crunched all the numbers and you've determined if it supports your hypothesis or not. So let's say we crunch the numbers and it does support your hypothesis that there is a correlation between height and finger span based on this data. Can we then say that that's probably true for the entire human population? What do you guys think? Whatever we figure out today, can we then use inductive reasoning to say that that's true for the entire human population? What do you guys think?
No.
No, and why not? And hint, I've already talked about it, I just never put it in these words. Why can't we apply this to the human population? Besides the fact that there's flaws, that's one of the big problems, right? All these flaws in the way we measured, already that's a big problem because our data is probably not that good. But what's another big one? And I mentioned it a few times so far today. Here's the hint. One of the last times I talked about it, the last example I gave was saying, what if we only use these people with a 10 and a 9? Hint, right? So why can't we apply this to the human population?
There are red flags.
Red flags is one of them, yep. You're getting there. And what I was getting at is our sample size is too small, right? If we just use those two people, that's a very small sample size, especially in that case, because those are the red flag people. But yeah, we need more people. Statistically, even though we haven't run statistical tests on this, common sense should tell us this small amount of people, the data we get from that cannot be applied to all 8 billion people on Earth. Number 14, this is a question similar to the one you answered earlier. Regarding someone's finger span, what additional questions can you ask? So I'm not going to give you that, just think about it. So you observed everybody, we all stood up and looked at how tall we were in their finger span. Now this is saying, yeah, other than height, right? So what else can we say? Is there a correlation between finger span and blank? Right? Just come up with some other question that we could ask in an experiment. That's it. And again, when you're done, upload it. And then you can leave once you've done that. Make sure you save it as a PDF before you upload it. Again, I'm here to help you. I'm going to be sitting here doing work, so if you need help doing anything, come and let me know. Otherwise, again, just work on your own. And then upload it when you're done, and you can leave. Ooh, one thing I did mention, do not copy each other. That's usually very often a problem. So you can always copy each other's data. So your table should all look like that, right? You should all copy each other's data. But when you're answering questions about the data, you work on your own. Like, was your hypothesis correct? You determine that yourself. That's that. Yes. Oh, I'm glad you mentioned that. So, she asked how to make a graph. So I have like 3 answers to that. First of all, we have graph paper that you can use to do that, and then you can just take a picture and insert that. There's my. And then the second answer to that question, here's the stuff, by the way. The second answer to that question is, if you look where it says insert a graph, there's links that show you how to make a graph if you want to make it on the computer. Third answer to that is if you come up here, and you know where I'm sitting, I can show you how to do it on my computer. So, yes? Yeah, that's a good question too. Is it a bar graph? The answer is yes, right? Because like I was saying here, you can have a bar for small, it goes to whatever the finger span is, a bar for medium, bar for tall, and a bar for very tall. Now for extra credit, since we have all this data, what would technically be better is a scatter plot graph, where each one of these people was a dot on the graph, which would look like, hold on. Anyway, you can do a scatter plot graph for extra credit if you want. The only reason I didn't use a scatter plot graph is because I'm trying to keep things easier for your first lab. But yes, a scatter plot graph would actually be better than a bar graph in this situation. That way, instead of putting people in the height categories, we would be putting down how tall they actually are. That would look like this. Of course, you would actually write out the word height instead of H. Height in centimeters. You would have finger span in centimeters. So let's see, the lowest number we have is 154. Highest number we have is 186. So about 150 to 190. Like I said, somewhere around 4 to 10. Each person will be represented by a dot on the graph. Right. Yes, bar graph is all you need to do. That's the issue. Again, I'm going to be sitting here working on other stuff. So if you need help, like she was asking about a graph, she decides to do it via computer, she can come up here and I'll show you how to do it. Good, we're still recording. This video will be handy for the people who didn't attend the lab. Now you guys are working on your lab, so you guys can ignore this if you want. But since we're recording, I'll go ahead and talk about the pre-lab that's going to be due on Friday. One thing to note about this pre-lab that's due on Friday, this time you have 2 videos that you have to watch. The last time it was extra credit. This time you have these 2 videos you need to watch and you need to answer questions while you watch them. When you're done answering the questions, I'll show you what it looks like. First, a lot of you are already familiar with this because you've already done the extra credit. Again, this time it's not extra credit. Just picking random answers. Okay. And when you're done, you hit the submit button. Oops. Towards the email. There we go. Hit the submit button. Oh yeah, that reminds me. You're going to get a lot of these questions too. You guys are in 101-03. Whenever you get any questions that ask what section, course and section number you are, 101-03, other than our one person who's coming in from a different section. So make sure you write the correct section. Otherwise, I might not see that you did it. So do that. All right. Once you're done, you hit the submit button. They'll say this, your response has been recorded, click view score, hit that, and then that gives you your results. Scroll down here, you can see where it shows my results right here, 4 out of 13, and it shows my email address. So you can screenshot that, and that's what you need to turn in for the first part of the field lab. So another thing we can do to make things easier, think about how to handle this. If you guys want to physically turn in a graph, like hand it in to me before you leave, instead of inserting it into your worksheet, you can do that too. Just make sure in the worksheet where it says insert your graph here, you add a little reminder that says I gave it to you. And then I'll go to my pack, stack it with graphs, and do it that way.
We can do a scatter plot, right? Bar graph.
Yeah, you can do scatter plot for extra credit. So
Do we still got to do bar graph though? Or like, does the scatter plot replace it?
you can do this replacement. So that's a good question. If you guys want to do a scatter plot instead of a bar graph, you can do that. But if you do a scatter plot in addition to a bar graph, the scatter plot will be considered extra credit. Good question. Yeah, you can use graph paper or a computer to make your graph. As long as you, just so everybody hears the question, he's asking if that has to be a certain way if you use the computer. Doesn't matter what program you use, I would recommend Google Sheets. As far as a certain way, just make sure you just follow those rules that are in that how the graphic worksheet that says this is how you do the graph. Make sure, for example, it has a title that starts with figure 1. Make sure that your x-axis and your y-axis have a label. Make sure you use your units, things like that. Yeah. So as long as you follow those rules, you should be okay. And again, don't be afraid to make a mistake. Make a mistake, you can either just deal with the lost points or you can correct it, get your points back. It's very low, low pressure. for example, okay, first of all, you don't want this, right? I know this seems a little confusing. Technically, you measure centimeters, but when you're graphing, you're not. It's just categories. You're either, don't draw up there, right? You're either short, tall, so you don't need centimeters. If you were to draw height, you actually write height out. So again, the numbers just get bar from small, short, right? For example, we'll use that one as an example. Since it's only one person, the person with the short category has a finger span of 6. Right? So you would have a bar, so short. Another thing you might want to consider is not starting with 1. You wouldn't have a lot of big differences between your bars. Well, I would. Somewhere closer to your lowest number on your graph should be about the lowest number on your data, and your highest number on your graph should be about the highest number on your data. So you don't have to do this. It works better. You don't even need that. You don't have data. Let's say you don't do that. Typically, what you do need to get rid of is you get rid of centimeters. Even though we measured it in centimeters, what we subtract is not a height centimeter. We've already calculated it. Yeah, that's perfect. It would also be approved instead of starting at 4, be starting at 3. That way it's a little bit of a bar. And then every graph should technically start. That's a good title, but you should start with figure 1. Colon, what you have. Okay. Now, if we weren't here and you just turned it in like that, we probably would have got full credit. Okay. Since we're talking about it. If you're doing it by hand, make sure you're consistent on your y-axis. So like, for example, if you start off with every 2 blocks is a number, like 4, 5, 6, but you stay with that scale. You don't want to be like starting off with every 2 blocks is a number, and then you start doing every block is a number, right? That's the thing you want to keep consistent. turn in, you might want to make some changes. Need title. I was just abbreviating because I was working on the board, but you don't want to abbreviate, so you know, like finger span, height. Even though you want those points for this, generally, you want to take up more space. The whole point of the graph is to visualize your data. It's really small. So do a good job. Okay, first lap, I won't worry about it. You would also need to make sure it's clear. You can see 150 clear, right? Like that 150, that 160, I mean. Like which line goes to 150, which line goes to 160. Make sure that's clear. Yeah, so that's it, yeah. I'm gonna abbreviate those, make sure the line's clear, to make sure I know which one's 150 and 160. Give it a title. And then, since it's the first lab, you can just put your name on it somewhere and give it to me physically. And when I grade your lab online, I'll have it. Huh? Yeah, you got to check, right? Yeah. But then, so if you hand it to me physically, where it says insert your graph there, you can just write, I gave it to you. Yep, I'm gonna erase this. But that'll work. Since you put the numbers there, never mind. In your case, that is good. Because you went above beyond. Explain what the short category was. So yeah, that's good. Since we're here to talk about it, another thing you need to do is that you don't lose points for it otherwise. Start every graph in figure 1. And of course, if it was more than one graph, you could choose these. Other than that, it's really good. And I can also explain it to somebody else. Since you've already done this, I wouldn't ask you to redo it. You don't want to start with 0. It's going to be a little bit of a change. If you start at something like 3, so the difference between the bars will be more drastic. Make sure, obviously, if you're going to physically turn it into it, make sure you put your name somewhere on it. Make sure you put it on the. Okay, good. I'm here with it. Short? Which one's got 4.25? Oh, yeah, I see. Yeah, that works. That'll be fine for this 100 level class. If you wanted to do that, which I like, the purpose of the graph is for you to understand what it says. Right? So in that case, if you wanted to, write the number. That's 6, 4.25. Even though the graph is there, if you wanted to, you could actually write it. You would never lose points for that. And figure 1 colon. Figure 1 colon height versus 15. Yeah, like it was similarly. If you were to turn that in the way it is, you wouldn't lose any points for it. Okay. Oh, single bathroom, single use bathroom, it's unisex right next to us. And then if you go way down the other side of the hallway, there is a back and forth.